Ruth Hawthorne's blood made dark coins in the snow. Each step forward cost her something she did not have left to give, but she kept moving because the bundle strapped to her chest was still warm, and that meant there was still time. The cabin appeared through the white, a shape darker than the storm, smoke rising from stone chimney. She made it 3 steps past the tree line before her legs quit. She went down hard on her knees, arms locked around the bundle, and her vision went gray at the edges. The door opened. A man filled the frame, broad-shouldered, bearded, with a rifle in one hand. He looked at her the way you look at a wolf that has wandered too close. His eyes went to the blood, then to her face, then to what she carried. He did not move. "Please," she said. Her voice came out broken. "She's only 8 months old. If you're feeling something right now, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that subscribe button. This story is just beginning, and you won't want to miss where it goes." Drop the name of your city in the comments so I can see how far this one travels. Because what that mountain man didn't know yet was that the bundle Ruth carried wasn't just a child. It was the last living piece of someone he had spent 3 years trying to forget. Ruth Brennan had been a widow for 6 days. Her husband Michael had been a gambler with a smile that made promises his hands never kept. They had lived in Billings, Montana, in a boarding house room that cost more than he earned. And when the men he owed money to came looking for payment, Michael had run. He told her to pack light. He told her they would start over in Helena. He told her a lot of things that turned out to be lies, including the part where he said the men wouldn't follow. They caught up to them on the 3rd day, on a frozen road 20 miles south of Copper Ridge. Michael tried to talk his way out. He had always been good at talking, but words don't stop fists, and fists don't stop knives. Ruth had been in the back of the wagon with Pearl when it happened. She heard her husband's voice go from pleading to choking to silent. Then she heard boots in the snow. She grabbed Pearl, ran into the trees, and did not look back. For 6 days she had walked. No food except snow melted in her mouth. No shelter except the time she found a fallen tree with enough branches to block the wind. Pearl had stopped crying on the 4th day. That was worse than the crying. Ruth had torn strips from her skirt to wrap the baby tighter, but the cold was winning. Her own feet had gone numb 2 days ago. The blood came from where she had fallen on a branch and gashed her side so deep she could feel the cold air inside the wound. When she saw the smoke, she thought it might be a dream. But the cabin was real, and the man in the doorway was real, and the way he looked at her, like she was a problem he hadn't asked for, that was real too. "Get inside before you freeze to death on my porch," he said finally. His voice was rough from disuse. She tried to stand, her legs folded. He caught her before she went down again, one arm under her shoulders, the other steadying her elbow, and half carried her through the door. The warmth inside hit her like a fist. He set her in a chair by the stove. Pearl made a small sound against Ruth's chest. The man looked at the bundle. "You hurt bad?" he asked. "I've been worse," she lied. He knelt, pulled back the edge of her coat, and saw the gash. His jaw tightened. "That needs stitching." "The baby first," Ruth said. "Please. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." The man straightened, stood there for 3 full seconds, looking at her like he was deciding something. Then he crossed to a shelf, pulled down a tin, and came back with a cloth soaked in goat's milk. "Hold her steady," he said. Ruth unwrapped Pearl. The baby's lips were blue. Her skin felt like wax, but when the cloth touched her mouth, she latched on and sucked weakly. Ruth's eyes burned. The man watched without expression. When Pearl finished, he took the cloth back, set it aside, and returned with a needle, thread, and a bottle of whiskey. "This is going to hurt," he said. "Everything hurts," Ruth said. He cleaned the wound with whiskey. She bit down on a strip of leather he handed her and did not make a sound while he stitched. His hands were steady and surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he fought mountains for a living. When he finished, he wrapped her ribs with clean linen and stepped back. "You'll live," he said. "Thank you," she whispered. He grunted, walked to the stove, and started heating something in a pot. The smell hit her, venison stew with onions and wild herbs, and her stomach clenched so hard it hurt. He ladled it into a bowl, set it in front of her with a spoon, and turned away. She ate slowly, carefully, trying not to let her hands shake. It was the best thing she had tasted in a week, maybe longer. When she looked up, he was watching her from across the room, with his arms crossed and his face unreadable. "What's your name?" she asked. "Silas Ward." "I'm Ruth. This is Pearl." He nodded once. How'd you end up bleeding in my woods? She told him. Not everything, just enough. Her husband's debts, the men on the road, 6 days walking with no direction except away. She did not cry. She had run out of tears somewhere around day 3. When she finished, Silas looked into the fire. You got anywhere to go? No. Family? None that'll take me. He was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the fire and the wind outside pressing against the walls. Finally, he stood. You can stay until you're healed. After that, we'll figure it out. I can work, Ruth said quickly. I can cook, clean, mend, anything you need. I won't be a burden. Didn't say you would be. He walked to a door at the back of the cabin. There's a bed in here. It's clean. Use it. That night, Ruth lay in the narrow bed with Pearl beside her and listened to Silas move around the main room. His footsteps were careful, deliberate, like he was used to living alone and didn't want to disturb the silence he had built. She wondered what kind of man lived this far from everything. She wondered what he was running from, or what he had lost. The next morning she woke to the sound of wood being split outside. Pearl was still asleep, warm and breathing steady. Ruth's side ached, but the wound had stopped bleeding. She stood carefully, wrapped Pearl in a blanket, and stepped into the main room. Silas came in with an armload of firewood. He stopped when he saw her. You should be resting. I've rested enough. She looked around the cabin. It was clean but stark. No curtains, no rugs, nothing soft. A man's space. A man who had given up on comfort. Let me make breakfast. He hesitated. You don't have to. I want to. He set the wood down, nodded. She found flour, lard, dried meat, and a jar of preserves in the larder. Within an hour she had made biscuits, fried salt pork, and gravy thick enough to stand a spoon in. The smell filled the cabin like a memory of something Silas had forgotten. When she set the plate in front of him, he stared at it. It's been a long time since anyone cooked for me, he said quietly. Then you're overdue. He ate slowly, like he was trying to make it last. When he finished, he looked at her with something close to confusion. That was the best meal I've had in 3 years. 3 years is a long time, she said carefully. His face closed. It is. She didn't push, but she understood. 3 years meant something. 3 years meant someone. Over the next 2 weeks, Ruth healed. Her strength came back in pieces, first her legs, then her hands, then the part of her that had gone numb during the 6 days in the snow. Pearl grew stronger too. Her cheeks filled out, her eyes brightened. She started making sounds that weren't quite crying and weren't quite laughing, but something in between. Silas watched them both, like he was trying to solve a problem he couldn't name. He was careful around Ruth, never too close, never too familiar, but he softened around Pearl. The baby had a way of looking at him with her wide gray eyes that seemed to crack something inside him. Once, Ruth found him holding Pearl by the fire, rocking her gently while she slept. He looked up, startled, like he'd been caught stealing. She wouldn't settle, he said. Figured I'd help. You're good with her, Ruth said. He handed Pearl back like the baby was made of glass. I'm not. You are, she said gently. You just forgot. That afternoon, Silas brought in a wooden box from the barn. It was small, weathered, and clearly hadn't been opened in a long time. He set it on the table and stood there, staring at it. What is it? Ruth asked. Something I should have burned. He opened the latch. Inside was a baby's christening gown, a silver rattle, and a daguerreotype photograph. He lifted the photograph out. A woman with dark hair and a soft smile looked back at him. She was holding a newborn. Her name was Catherine, Silas said. We were married 4 years. She died giving birth. The baby, our daughter, lived 3 days. Her name was Rose. Ruth's throat tightened. I'm sorry. That was 3 years ago. He set the photograph down. I came up here because I couldn't stand to be around people who looked at me like I was something broken. I built this cabin, I stayed, and I convinced myself I didn't need anything else. He looked at Ruth, then at Pearl, asleep in her arms. And then you showed up, he said. Bleeding in the snow with a baby I couldn't let die. And every time I look at her, I see Rose. And every time you feed her or sing to her or wrap her up warm, I remember what it felt like to want something more than just surviving. Ruth stepped closer. You're not broken, Silas. I am, he said, but maybe that's all right. Maybe broken things can still hold something worth keeping. She reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away. A month later, Silas rode into Copper Ridge with Ruth beside him and Pearl bundled between them. He needed to sell furs and restock supplies, but Ruth knew the real reason. He wanted people to see her. He wanted them to know she wasn't just some woman he'd taken in out of pity. They pulled up outside the trading post. A man Ruth didn't know, broad, red-faced with a trader's sharp eyes, came out and stopped when he saw Silas. "Ward," the man said, "didn't think you came down off that mountain anymore." "Had a reason," Silas said. He helped Ruth down from the wagon. "This is Ruth Brennan. She and her daughter are staying with me." The trader's eyes flicked over Ruth, then Pearl, then back to Silas. His mouth curved. "Staying with you. That what we're calling it now?" Silas's jaw went tight. "Say that again." The trader laughed. "Easy, Ward. Just surprised is all. You disappeared after Catherine died. Figured you'd turned into a hermit for good. Now you show up with a woman and a baby like..." "Like what?" Silas's voice was low and dangerous. The trader held up his hands. "Just saying it's sudden, that's all. Woman shows up out of nowhere, moves into your cabin. People are going to talk." A small crowd had gathered. Ruth felt their eyes on her. She knew what they were thinking. She had heard it before, in Billings, in every town she and Michael had drifted through. She kept her head up. Silas stepped between her and the trader. "Let me make this clear. Ruth Brennan saved her daughter's life by walking 6 days through a blizzard with nothing but the clothes on her back and a wound that should have killed her. She made it to my door because she refused to quit. And when I brought her inside, she didn't ask for anything except help for her child." He turned to face the crowd, his voice carried. "She's been with me for 5 weeks. In that time, she's worked harder than any hired hand I've ever had. She cooks, she mends, she keeps that cabin running while I'm out checking traps. And she does it while caring for an infant who would have died without her." He looked back at the trader. "So if any man here has something to say about Ruth Brennan, say it now. Because after today, if I hear one word, one whisper, I'll make sure you regret it." No one spoke. The trader cleared his throat. "Didn't mean any offense, Ward." "Yes, you did." Silas turned to Ruth. "Let's get what we came for." They walked into the trading post together. Ruth's hands were shaking, but not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like being seen for the first time in her life. When they came back out, a woman was waiting by the wagon. She was older, gray-haired, with kind eyes. "Miss Brennan?" she said. "I'm Martha Colby. I run the boarding house in town." She held out a small package. "I heard what Mr. Ward said, and I wanted you to have this. It's nothing much, just some fabric and thread, but I thought you might be able to use it for the baby." Ruth took the package. Her throat was too tight to speak. "You're welcome in Copper Ridge," Martha said gently. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." On the ride home, Silas was quiet. Pearl slept against Ruth's chest. The sun was setting behind the mountains, turning the snow gold and pink. "Thank you," Ruth said finally, "for what you said back there." Silas glanced at her. "I meant it." "I know. That's why it mattered." He reached over and took her hand. The wagon rocked gently over the frozen road. That night, after Pearl was asleep, Silas and Ruth sat by the fire. He poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. They didn't speak for a long time. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when 2 people understand each other without needing words. "I need to tell you something," Silas said finally. Ruth waited. "When you showed up in the snow, I almost didn't help you." He stared into his cup. "I thought if I opened that door, I'd be letting something in I couldn't control. Something that would break me all over again." "But you did," Ruth said softly. "Because of Pearl." He looked at her. "I couldn't let a child die. Not after Rose. But it wasn't just that. When you said please, when you asked me to help her before you helped yourself, I knew you were the kind of person Catherine would have wanted me to save. He set his cup down. And then you stayed. And you didn't pity me. You didn't try to fix me. You just lived here. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like you belonged. Ruth's eyes burned. I do belong. I know. He reached across the space between them and cupped her face with one rough hand. I spent 3 years convinced I was done, that I'd used up my chance at something good. And then you walked out of a blizzard carrying a child who looked like mine, and I realized I'd been wrong. About what? She whispered. About being done. He leaned closer. You didn't shatter my heart, Ruth. You put it back together. You and Pearl. You gave me a reason to stop surviving and start living again. She closed the distance and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, like neither of them quite believed it was real. When she pulled back, he was looking at her like she was something rare and breakable and worth protecting. Stay, he said. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because this is where you want to be. I already decided that, she said. Weeks ago. He smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. 2 years later, in the summer of 1889, Ruth stood in the doorway of the cabin and watched Silas and Pearl in the garden. Pearl was nearly 3 now, talking in full sentences, running everywhere, laughing at things only she understood. Silas had built her a small wooden horse that she dragged around like a loyal companion. He knelt beside her now, showing her how to plant beans in neat rows. The cabin had changed. There were curtains in the windows, rugs on the floor, a cradle by the fire where their son Samuel slept, with his tiny fists curled against his chest. Ruth's hands were scarred from work and strong from years of keeping this place alive. She was still the woman who had walked out of a blizzard half dead, but she was also the woman who had been offered a home and had taken it. Silas looked up and saw her watching. He said something to Pearl, then walked over. He kissed Ruth's temple without breaking stride. Stew smells good, he said. You say that every night, she said, smiling. It's true every night. Pearl ran up and grabbed Ruth's skirt. Mama, come see. Papa says I planted 12 beans. 12 is a lot of beans, Ruth said seriously. Pearl beamed and ran back to the garden. Silas stood beside Ruth, and they watched their daughter dig in the dirt with the kind of focus only a child can manage. You ever think about that first night? He asked quietly. Every day, Ruth said. Me too. He took her hand. I almost didn't open the door, but you did. Because you didn't give me a choice. He turned to face her. You showed up carrying the one thing I couldn't ignore. And you didn't just save Pearl. You saved me. Ruth leaned into him. You saved me first. We're even then. She laughed. We are. That night, after the children were asleep, Ruth stood by the fire and thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, bleeding, broken, carrying a child through snow with nothing but hope keeping her alive. She thought about the man who had opened the door when he could have stayed hidden, and she thought about the life they had built together out of grief and chance, and something that looked a lot like grace. She wasn't the widow who had stumbled out of a storm. She was the woman who had been worth saving, and that made all the difference.